Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We have a short passage for today, only 6 verses. But before we'll go into our passage, I wanted to share with you a couple things. One of them is, as you might know, if you don't know by now, okay, you might want to know it anyhow. I love what is called structural analysis. When you see how parts of the Bible put together, how the flow of the text goes, and so on and so forth. There is a way to structure the text. It's called chiastic structure. I wrote it. Yeah, it's from the Greek letter chi. I mean, we spell it like this, but it's a chi, like chemistry. Okay, so it's a chiastic structure. It looks like this. That's the letter that word Christos, Christ starts from. Okay, that's why we have Christ. We do not have Christ. Okay, that would be fun actually to pronounce that. But it's chiastic structure, so it's a chiastic structure, or sometimes it's called chiasms. So when you have the ends parallel and then it goes to the middle, okay? So the thing is, why did I write it down? We have two structures that present text a little bit differently. One of them, none of them are mine invention. This one, the red one, is taken from it. That's confusing. I should have done it differently, but that's okay. I should have write, violet from the blue book, and then the red one from kind of more like orange book. But so to make sure that you are totally confused, I did it vice versa. So that's what the pastor's job, So as long as you're confused, I can manipulate you. This is what the pastor is supposed to do. Okay? But, seriously. So this one is taken from one of our professors, Concordia. So this is Concordia Publishing House. Like, really, cannot be even more Lutheran, anything. Reed Lessing, he wrote commentaries on Isaiah. So far we have 2. So in his commentaries on the last part of Isaiah, when he analyzes the text, he sees, and I would actually more agree with that, but different story. That in the middle of this block from 59 to 63, we have chapter 61, and we talked about this chapter. That's sometimes what is called the 5th Song of the Servant. Song of the Servant. So the song where he is more glorified. After chapter 53, where he goes through death, and at the very end there is a resurrection. Now here is the Lord anointed me to proclaim the good news that the year of the Jubilee, and so on and so forth. So that's the middle part. And then you have reflecting, sandwich in between in chapter 60, second part, and 61, and sandwich in between beginning of chapter 60 and 62, and then the last part of 59 and 63. Okay? That's possible, though another gentleman, actually whose opinion I respect too, though I've met with Dr. Lessing, great guy. One of the few professors who after a while was like, I cannot serve the church good enough if I will be professor only. So he stepped down from being professor. No, I don't want to even say step down. He just stepped out of being professor. He became a parish pastor again. So probably with being parish pastor, maybe he will go back to, academia, or maybe not. We'll see. Another gentleman is David Dorsey, and he actually did a tremendous job. That's the commentary on the whole Old Testament. It's a commentary from Genesis to Malachi, the literary structure of the Old Testament. Basically, every book is more or less structured, sometimes this way, sometimes parallel, parallelism, and so on and so forth. Every book, not every passage though, of course, but many things. So if you want to see, at least have a hint how the text flows, basically you can go. What he does is actually he puts our passage. So see, our passage today is over here in B and the first part of C. What he does is he puts our passage in the middle, and then 61 is in the C and C prime and reflected, which is a reflection of C. What I wanted to say is, if you get a book, if you get a commentary with things like that, or any other structures. Do not be surprised that they will differ, because paying attention to different attributes of the text, you can structure text a little bit differently. It's no big deal. Those paradigms or those schemes, in the good sense of the word, are not part of the Bible in a sense. They are not like, that's the only way you can structure the text. This is not, neither this one nor this one has divine imprimatur. Okay? For example, I will give you more, probably closer to home example, Gospel of John. If you pay attention to phrases like I am, okay, I'm the light, I'm the door, I'm good shepherd, and so on and so forth. We have, with I am and I am something, we have 14 phrases within Gospel of John. So theoretically, you can break them into blocks of 14 passages that's somehow centered around or revolve around the phrase I am something. Or we have 3 Passovers in the Gospel of John. In chapter 2, we have one where he goes and cleans the temple first time, when Jesus goes and cleans the temple first time. Then there is one in chapter 6 where it's not obvious that this is a Passover, but he talks about the bread from heaven, and so most likely it happened during the Passover season. And then starting with chapter 12 and to the end, basically to chapter 20 included. That's another Passover. So you can structure it as 3 Passovers. So what I wanted to share is, when you read scholarly commentaries or just a commentary, if somebody presents the structure, and if you have seen or saw or you see it differently, do not be alarmed or surprised. It's another view. It is important. You know, a little bit down to earth, example. When you go to buy a car, what things are important for you? See, you structure your choice of a car based on the things that are important to you. I know people for whom the most important thing in the car was it should be red.
The what?
It should be red. Red color. Okay? That's it. Okay? Happens. Okay? So then other thing, like they want, truck or pickup truck versus, sedan. Or they want I don't know, what's that? Convertible, sedan, but convertible. So that's your structuring things. So just wanted to share. Now, let us go into our text. And we just go slowly, verse by verse. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. So, 2 things immediately that we do not see in English, and it's not because the English translation is bad, we just do not have that feature in English language. Arise and shine are verbs, feminine construction verbs. So it's the command to somebody who is a woman or a girl, okay? Singular. And not even for, many, it's not plural, it's singular. So you, singular, girl or lady, arise and shine. So with this, what or who could that be? And comparing with previous passages, most likely, and I like to say it here in our congregation, it's the daughter of Zion or Jerusalem. Both of them are, both of them have, feminine features in the text. It's daughter, whose name is Zion, and daughter whose name is Jerusalem. Okay, first of all, any city in Hebrew language would be she, okay? And that's why people would surround them with walls and have the gates. And as long as gates are closed and walls are strong, nor enemies can get through, and virgins are virgins. Okay? If enemy breaches the wall or breaks through the gates, virgins in the city are not virgins anymore. You know, that's the nature of the war. So we need to surround and support and make sure that the girls, wives, aunts, you know, grandmothers, wives, daughters, anybody should be protected. Okay? Another thing, Zion is not a city. Zion is a hill or mountain. Okay? And mountain in Hebrew is also sheep. Okay? But in this particular case, most likely the addressee of those verses is Zion and Jerusalem together. And the reason why they can rise and shine, and we have that song, rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. Okay, so this one. So the reason is, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. So we have two things. One of them is the light, and with the word light, we are going back. I probably should raise it. We are going back to Genesis chapter 1. So, since everything in Isaiah is going through basically death and resurrection, or if we talk about elements of nature, we go through a recreation process. So God recreates everything anew, and by the end, just for 1 second, let us jump into 65, I believe. Chapter 65. Yes. Verse 17. For behold, I create the new heavens and the new earth. Okay? Or I create renewed heavens and renewed earth. However you want to translate it, it doesn't really matter at this point. But my point is, you know, we have those motifs that based on what, excuse me, based on the creation account that we have in Genesis 1, Isaiah goes through the same thing. It does not mean that the planet Earth in the days of Isaiah was totally changed. But the political setting, the setting of society, first of all, the new earth and moon in the sense of the ruling and governing policies, they were changed. So with this in mind, we have new light. And that should not surprise us, because the very first thing in account of creation was the light. Okay? If we'll go into Genesis 1, verse 5. Three, sorry, yeah, sure. Okay, I knew 5 was too far. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated light from the darkness, and called the light day, and the darkness called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. So the very first day, what we have is creation of light. Okay, light as a created entity. Okay, so if we'll go with this in mind, if we'll go back, what we see is those who were in the darkness, and those who were in the darkness because of their sin, they were covered with that. Now they can rise and they can shine, but their shyness is reflective shyness. Okay, so they will shine only because God sent His light, and they can reflect. So there are two things: the light and His glory, actually. And then verse 2. So we are back in Isaiah. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and the thick darkness the people. But the Lord will arise upon you, and His glory will be seen upon you. Okay? So what we have is the fact that the earth is covered with darkness. Again, we are going back into Genesis motif. Remember, we have separation of light and the darkness. And right now what we have is, while whole earth is still covered with darkness, okay, that's the earth. And this is, I hope this is black. Okay, and this is our darkness, and yet Jerusalem and Zion are invited to stand up, rise and shine over that. So we have a mountain and the city around it, because the light light shines. Okay, and then this sends a reflection, and because of what happens here, it will, push the darkness away. Okay, and with this in mind, we need to connect it to two more important passages. One of them is the one that we know, and it's Gospel of John, chapter 1. Oh boy, I should have been. Okay, here we go. 6 through 8. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came to bear witness about the light, and that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but to bear witness about the light. And one more. Oh, sorry, previous verse. Verse 3 and 4. All the things were made through him, through the Word, and without him was nothing that was made. In him was life, and the light was the light of man. The light shines in the darkness, and darkness has not overcome it. Okay, so however thick darkness is, because this light is so powerful, slowly but surely it pushes darkness away. Okay, and I think it is very important for us today, because sometimes it doesn't look like that. It looks vice versa. We think that it's more and more, it's more difficult and even more difficult, to bring the light, to tell people about Jesus in our PC environment. There are some things. Yesterday I've met with one of our pastors who runs a pregnancy center in Lompoc. And what he shared with me is there are legislators' initiatives to make the work of pregnancy centers as difficult as possible, up to get them closed. So it is hard, it is difficult, but we have a promise that as long as we shine, not with our power, not with our strength, as long as we reflect the power of God, it still will be, it still will push the darkness around those areas. But, we know from history that sometimes it really gets difficult. I come from the country where we had like 70 years of socialist regime with no churches allowed for a few decades. And if they would find Bible in your home, not even teaching, not even preaching, if they would just find Bible in your home, you can, shovel the snow in Siberia for 10, 15 years. Okay, but going back to positive side. So what we have here is that what was fulfilled, future in Jesus. But in the book of Isaiah, it is a reflection, not a reflection, it is a fulfillment of what was promised before. Let us flip into Isaiah chapter 2. I point those verses many times, but we need to kind of like set them in mind, really, really strong, really serious. Because basically, what we have in the beginning of Isaiah is one way or another is always like it's fulfilled in a positive way in the end of Isaiah. So what we have in the very beginning of Isaiah is the fact, or is a promise that so many people or many nations shall come and say, come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord. So that's our Zion. Okay? To the house of the God of Jacob. Okay? that they may teach us his way, God's ways, and that we may walk in his path. For out of Zion shall come the law, or actually Torah, okay, the teaching, the word of God. That would be better. And the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Okay? So we have a promise that Zion and Jerusalem, okay, the cult, in the sense of worship, okay, not in the sense of bad word of cult that we are thinking about, like some people who are gathered together for weird reasons, you know. So the cult and the culture, so worship and the culture which is produced by that worship, they will draw people into their midst, okay? And so fulfillment of that, we see one of them, not the only one, but we see that in chapter 60. So let us go back to chapter 60. Verse 3. And nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Okay? So if we put these passages together as a parallel, we see, at least I see, an obvious connection. Now, it is important to notice one thing. It is not the first time when other kings are attracted to God's worship, cult, and culture. God's worship and God's culture. Basically, in every historical period, in every covenant, sometimes we call them, we see God's chosen people are supported or even encouraged by someone who is an outsider. Okay? Let me give you an example. The first one. When Abram comes to the land, almost immediately, within a couple of years, he meets with the guy who gives him gifts. Who is the guy? His name is... Nobody remembers? Good. Melchizedek. Okay? He supports Abraham. Okay? And he blesses Abraham. And he blesses God of Abraham. Okay? And then they exchange the gifts. But the Melchizedek comes from the outside after Abraham is victorious over few other kings, you know, and so on and so forth. Then one more, let's scroll in time really, really far, about 400 years, and we are in the times of Moses. Moses takes, under God's inspiration, under God's leadership, yes, everything is fine. He is not, selfish guy, but he takes people into the wilderness. And right before they receive 10 commandments, somebody from the outside shows up and says, Moses, it would be much better if you would do it this way and this way and this way. Who is that?
Babel.
What?
His father-in-law.
What?
I said but Babel.
Nah, actually no, he was a good guy. It was his father-in-law. In chapter 18 in Exodus, his father-in-law comes and he sees that the Moses, poor guy, needs to judge between all the problems that are created in the camp of Israelites. And basically, he is one on the kind of higher chair on the throne, and they come and have dispute, and he listens to them, and he has to say who is right and who is wrong. And now think about that. 600,000 men, plus their wives, plus their kids, are in the camp. Somebody asked one family A asked family B, can we have your chairs for today because we have a Christmas party? And they say, sure, no problem. So they gave them their chair. When they returned their chair, some of the chairs were scratched by kids because they were bored and they had nothing to do. And instead of playing their iPhones, they started to scratch on the chairs. So they brought it back. So these two families appear in front of Moses. And Moses has to deal with them. Okay, if you scratch the chair, please pay them back. Pay them back for the chairs and pay them 20% more so they can replace and have a better chairs. Okay, so these guys take off and they go toward their families. But by the time they arrive to their tents, something else happened and they go to the end of the line. So it was almost eternal. So then his father-in-law, when he comes, what he says, you're going to kill yourself and you're going to drive your people mad. what you need to do is you need to break, you have 12 tribes, but within tribes, you need to break them into thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s, and set up judges over 1,000. You have elders as the head of the tribes, and you need to set up those who would be in charge of thousands and hundreds and 50s and 10s. It was the guy from the outside who suggested the system of higher and lower chords that we use actually till this day. Maybe not exactly the way it is, but the paradigm is right there. Okay? Then, when we come to the times of David, there is another guy who shows up. It's a Hiram of Tyre. So it's if we have a land, that's our land. Okay? That's our Dead Sea, that's the Jordan, that's the Galilee, Lake of Galilee, or Galilee Sea. That's our Mediterranean Sea. So we are roughly here, but the Tyre and Sidon, so the king of Tyre, lives actually right here. Right. And these guys starts to supply wood and food, wood and workers, for what? To build David the palace, and then he actually supplies even more, which is more important, for the temple. Okay, and that's a big deal. It's not just a political alliance. When a king starts to support building of somebody's temple, it's a big deal. That means that the king is converted, because you don't want to mess with your, with your divine objects in your country. I mean, they worship some very, vicious gods, I would say. And so if you are not sure that these gods will have no power over you, you don't want to make any alliances with other, divinities. Now, when we will come to Jesus, first people who came to worship him were shepherds. Okay? When Jesus was born. And that's the Israelites. But almost right after, in our text, almost right after, within 2 years, we have wise men who came from the east. Okay, probably somewhere over here, where we have Tigris and Euphrates from Babylonia, or by that time it was not even Persia, it was Roman Empire, but that's the Persian Gulf, that's our Tigris and Euphrates. So most likely they came from here. Why? Because all other nations needed to recognize that there is something special here. That this king is the king for everybody. And now we live quite far from that place, and yet we do recognize the king that was born in Bethlehem, who now ascended into heaven, and we do not really necessarily have a connection with the land, and that's a different story. We're not going to talk about that. But the point is, he was born, raised there. So now we bring our gifts to this king, to this king as the king of the nations. So let's go a little bit further. Verses 4. Lift up your eyes all around and see. They all gather together, they come to you. Your sons shall come from afar, your daughters shall be carried on a heap. So, two things about that. First of all, for those who would read these words at first, most likely they would think about the end of exile. It is not exile time yet. I'm not going to redraw our timeline today. You probably know it by heart by now. So we are few hundred years before exile, but even in the book of Isaiah, it is pretty clear. If you guys will not change your trajectory, and you probably will not, you will end up in exile. But there is a promise of return, and this is one of them. Your sons would be brought back, and daughters would be brought, we didn't carry our kids on the side. We carried them over here. But the point is, they would be carried safely, relatively comfortably from place to place with personal attention to the child. Okay? So therefore, sons and daughters provide what for society? They provide future. So your future is secured and provided and taken care of. Okay, verse 5. Then you shall see and be radiant. Okay, now going back to this picture. So you will shine. And your heart shall thrill and exalt, because the abundance of sea shall be turned to you, the wealth of nations shall come to you. In the Bible, it is very regular parallel. We have people of the land, and that's Israel, especially, okay, yes, just leave it like that. In the Bible, people of the land are Israelites, or people of Judea, depending on the present political structure that we are in the text. People of the sea are not necessarily even those who like float on ships, but it's just Gentiles. So any Gentiles can be compared with the sea imagery. Think about that. How many leaders of Israel we have who, before they became leaders of Israel in one or another capacity, used to be shepherds? Okay? Our patriarchs, all of them. Okay? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses, before he led people from Egypt, he was a shepherd for 40 years. 40 years. One of the parade examples, probably. David. Okay? He was a shepherd, he became a king. We have few prophets who used to be shepherds, then became prophets for Israel. Now, when we think about disciples of Jesus, how many of them had their previous job, like a second career, pastors? What was their first career? How many of them were shepherds? Think.
Peter was
Zero. Yes.
Several were fishermen.
Yeah, they were fishermen. Okay? And maybe that's why after, or right before ascension, after death and resurrection, Jesus tells them to be prepared to do what? Let's go into the book of Acts, chapter. That's one thing. That's the end of the Gospel of John. But if we are in the beginning of book of Acts in chapter 1 and verse 8, what do we hear from the mouth of Jesus concerning all disciples or all apostles together? You will receive, but you will receive the power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses. Okay, and now think about that. In Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Okay? So from the very beginning, they are told that the ministry will start in Jerusalem. It will be carried out in Judea. It does not mean that, oh no, forget about that. Okay, they killed me here, so don't worry about them. Let them rot in their sin, we do not need to worry about these guys. Okay, no. It will start in Jerusalem. It will expand into whole country in Judea. It will go into neighboring country, with which actually, and I know you guys, okay, it's Jesus telling to apostles, you actually have a weird relationship. So first of all, you go to your half-brothers, okay? And if you will be able to carry that mission, then by my power, by the power of the Holy Spirit, it will go to the ends of the earth, okay? And that's important. That's important to understand. But there is another thing that we can read in this verse 5. When we do carry our mission properly, when we share our word, then people come and join the church, and they use their gifts and share those gifts with the church. Their talents, what they have learned in their life, their ability, for music, for management, for anything. Okay, verse 6, and we will conclude. A multitude of camels shall cover you, and young camels of Midian and Ephah. All those from Sheba shall come to you. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall bring good news and praises of the Lord. Okay? And that's probably why we have this text connected to our gospel reading for today, when the wise men came and brought gold and frankincense and myrrh, and they probably came on camels. And we'll talk about this, how many wise men were there and things like that. So We'll save it for next time. Questions or comments?